tonight's topic, it used to have a half step, to now it's 7 steps to a real relationship. And what we mean by a real relationship is ultimately one in which we actually feel connection. Because at the end of the day, the thing that all of our hearts long for is a sense of connection. Right? We want to know that we belong somewhere, that we have that contact with another human being who actually knows who we are in a very deep and real way. And ironically, the very place where we are more likely to get into trouble is with the people that we apparently love the most. Those who are most important to us. Because we have this crazy idea that once we fall in love, we're just going to stay in love. And if the love goes away, it just goes away, like it's some entity that's totally outside of our control. Right? What happened to the feeling? We have no idea how much we have to do with what happens to that feeling every single step of the way. And as we always do, we're weaving our personal story throughout our talk tonight, because to understand what happens for us when we run into trouble in relationship, and really this applies to all relationships, but romantic relationships in particular is our focus for tonight. In order to understand what happens, we also have to understand who we are going into a relationship. And for me, my family background, as Duane said earlier, is that I come from a Presbyterian family. My dad was a Presbyterian minister. We are extremely nice in my family. We are very polite. We have rules that everybody understands without even having to say anything. Drives Duane absolutely crazy because he's never been educated in these particular rules. But that's how we operate.
Nor do I have any intention.
That's how my family operates. And if you had helicoptered into my family when I was young, it would have looked like Leave It to Beaver, if you're of a certain age. I'm not sure what the more up-to-date version of that would be. And at the same time, things were distant in my family. And one of the things that I would struggle with in particular in my family was my dad really felt like he had a mission in the world. He started out as a Presbyterian minister, ended up doing a lot of social work. In particular, we lived in northern Ontario. He would fly into all the really remote northern reserves doing different social work activities. And he was very dedicated and very committed and very passionate. And he would bring his work home with him. And he would be very stressed out. And he would be flying for 3 weeks out of every month. And he would have migraine headaches. And my brother and I would be excited to see him when he walked in the door, and my mother would say, "Now is not a good time to bother your father." And those moments for me were every bit as traumatic as what might occur if you grew up in a family where there was a lot of violence or yelling or hitting. For me, in those moments, for all of us, it's the moments of disconnection that are extremely painful. And in that moment, when I am longing to connect and something happens to cause a disconnection, those are the moments that become teaching moments for us in terms of how we then move into relationship in our lives. For me as a young girl, one of the things I took on about myself as a result of that particular repeated interaction that I had over a number of years with my dad is that I started feeling like who I was wasn't important. And we all have these moments. What happens is we take on what we call a suspicion about ourselves, and then we try to find a strategy to regain the connection again. We try behavior A, doesn't work. Behavior B doesn't work. Behavior C, it works. So who I became was somebody who fit into my nice, polite family. I became someone who was quiet, who would know without ever having to talk to my dad whether now was a good time to bother your father or not. I could read it. And I figured out ways of connecting with him, of having a good intellectual conversation with him. But all the while at an emotional level, fearing that who I was not important to him. And it's this emotional underbelly that gets us into trouble in relationship. And we're going to talk specifically about how come that happens. Because when we grow up, and now we're adults walking around in the world, looking for a sense of connection again, it's those old moments of disconnection that just want to rear up and get in the way, and we end up sabotaging the very thing we want the most.
And it's those old wounds, actually, that play a big part in determining who you choose to be in a relationship with, too. Because it's looking for a good ending to a bad old story. So it's kind of attracted to semblance of the bad old story at the start. We'll get into that more later. I didn't come from a Presbyterian family. I came from... what really did I come from? I wish I find one word that would describe it, but Catholic, it was Catholic on both sides, but that doesn't say too much. Well, eventually it did, because there's a whole lot of guilt in the Catholicism. But it was an Irish, my father was Irish, my mother was French-Canadian. And my father was a classic binge-drinking Irish alcoholic. When he drank to cause trouble. He wasn't a peaceful drunk that came home and collapsed on the couch and you brought him a pillow or laughed or wanted to hug everybody. No, my dad came home, he didn't want to hug everybody, he wanted to kill my mother. That's what he wanted. At least that's what it looked like. There's a whole lot of craziness in our family that way. I was the only son, I had 3 sisters and a mother. You can well imagine, I had a choice to make. Either I'm going to join him and be like him, which statistically ought to have happened. Didn't happen. No, I became the new male hero in the family system. My mother was the oldest in her family, and they all lived close by, and everyone was heralding me as this answer to my bad father. So when Catherine learned how to be quiet and polite and have intelligent conversations with her father to gain acceptance and approval, I learned how to be a little superboy. All the while, feeling like when I stepped out of my house, I wondered what the neighbors were thinking. Did they hear the screaming and the yelling and the breaking of windows or bodies falling on the floor with whoever he brought home from the pub that night, end up some big fight? A lot of crazy, crazy things happened. The SWAT squad came to our house because my dad put a bullet hole through the living room window. Didn't aim it at anybody, but he just wanted to put on a show. Crazy. And I'm still dealing with the depth of what that really did to me. It's not to say when he was sober that he was a wonderful guy. He was a very sensitive, creative man with a great sense of humor, and he, in some ways, was actually more connected to me on a personal level than my mother, who was a woman that attended to task. Meals on the table at the same time every night, tucked us into bed. Christmas presents, birthdays, the rituals of family she attended to like a religion. But I, underneath it all, being the only son in that system, I can't tell you what I feared it meant about me. One as a family and about me personally. That we were the shame of the neighborhood and that men were essentially bad. And I was the son of Patty. I didn't want to become a man and grow up. I had to organize myself very quickly to be anything but that. And it worked.
And so, despite the fact that our families looked very different, we both had an equal inability to actually be in authentic connection. We both could only get so close to each other because of what we had learned in our families, because you learn how connected you can be in your family. My family, it was kind of a polite distance. We were lovely to each other, nice, most of the time. Once in a while, my dad would lose his temper, which also was difficult for me. In Duane's family, it was volatile. They kept each other at this distance with volatility, right? His family could have used a little bit of mine's gentleness, and mine could use a bit more honesty. And so those things add up to this kind of distance.
And guess what we would then both be attracted to in each other? You know, couples tend to fight with the disowned aspects of themselves. So I was kind of attracted to that niceness. Oh, what a relief after what I've been through. Are you kidding me? This girl's got a master's degree in clinical psych. She knows my language. She likes what I say. She's beautiful, and she's nice. She's nice. You're supposed to tell
I know.
them what...
You skipped ahead a smidge.
I did.
Yeah. Just a tiny bit.
Yeah, well, that's what you like about me, right?
I know, I do like that about you. And coming into that moment where we met and were attracted to each other, because we are going to take you through our story tonight as well. My marriage had ended, and this was a huge failure for me in my family, right? Because he was the son of a Presbyterian minister. It wasn't good. And so I won't get into all the details, but I kind of went through this big sort of self-revelatory, exploratory thing, and it followed on the heels of the birth of my daughter. I almost died, and I had a near-death experience, and that kind of shook my world, made me rethink who I was, made me rethink what was important to me. Everything kind of got, jumbled up, fell apart, and I had to put it back together again. And very unfortunately, one of the casualties in all of that was my marriage. And so when Duane says we're attracted to a good old ending to a bad old story, when I met him, that feeling of, oh no, maybe I'm not good enough, right, was so amplified. Wasn't necessarily aware of it, but that thing that I was carrying from my family was really amplified. And I look across, and I met him watching him do what we're doing here tonight. He was on stage, and he was talking about relationships. Relationships. That ticks a few boxes, wouldn't you say, right off the bat? Man talking about feelings.
But I had just recovered from a 13-year relationship. I was still in recovery mode. I spoke very passionately about what I learned from the 13 years. But that didn't mean I knew how now to be in one. Right? I learned a whole lot, but I had not sorted it all out yet. She didn't know that. I didn't tell her either.
So I look across and I think to myself, look at that guy up there on the stage. He is important. And subconsciously, part of what's going on is if I can get the important man to make me important, then maybe I will be important. Right? If I become important to him, then finally I will be. So I look up at him and I think, look at that guy. There is somebody who knows who he is. He's expressive. He's passionate. He's talking about relationships. There is something about that guy.
And I looked across, so I got one step ahead of myself already. And I just said, yes. I spent 13 years, really, given what you knew about my past, like having to be Superboy at my family of origin and being heralded in as the great new savior. The 13 years I spent in a relationship, she was also attracted to me because I was Superboy. Superman now.
Let's hope.
Superboy wouldn't have worked.
No, not so much.
Superman. I was Superman. In fact, she had a terrible, terrible story. And I rescued her initially, and she just thought I was the greatest thing in the world. But because she had a hard time accepting her value too, because we all meet somebody at the same level of what we call differentiation. Take our PRAC program if you want to learn more about that. We were attracted to each other, and Superman was not able to save her. I had never known that experience before in my life. In fact, when I didn't save her, she took shots at me that I turned into Darth Vader in her mind. This was a severe identity crisis, and I collapsed. I was in a clinical depression a few years before I met Catherine. That's how Clearmind started, was me working through my depression. So here she shows up, and it was like, she's not going to criticize me. That's really the main criterion. She's not going to criticize me. She loves what I'm saying. She gets it. This is safe. And we can move with this.
And when we first introduce ourselves, it's like we're not going to walk over and say, you know what, I have this terrible fear inside of me that I am not important, that I am a complete loser, and I feel like if you would love me, I would finally be important. So I really need you to love me so that I can feel okay about myself.
Security!
Right? That's not how it works. Even though that is more honestly what it, at some level, is going on under the surface.
Or,
No?
well, I've never done this one, I don't think.
Okay. Something
I wouldn't go up to her and say, you wouldn't believe what a piece of poop I really think I am. I came from a family that it was disgusting. Like I never saw. You think I know something about relationships? Are you out of your mind? My parents, I saw them kiss once. I just felt like we are flawed. Like I am flawed. Like I am nothing. Like I don't even belong anywhere. Do you want to go on a date?
It's not how it works, right? Because what we pull out is those strategies for connection that worked in our family of origin. So what I pull out is my nice, charming, I'm going to have a good intellectual conversation with you mask, the thing that I learned worked with my dad. And that's what we introduce ourselves with, right? We put on our masks and our strategy systems. And that works to a certain degree. But sooner or later, all of us in relationship end up falling into a crisis. And that crisis happens when we hit the wall of intimacy that we no longer are capable of going any further. We hit that wall that we learned.
And this, folks, perhaps it may be the most unique feature of the Clearmind experience people have with us, is how we view that. There are so many methodologies and psychologies that will help you eliminate the crisis, get away from the crisis, patch up the crisis, cope with the crisis, as opposed to seeing it as a necessary evolutionary step in your relationship. All relationships will reach a state of crisis because we're all attracted to a good ending to a bad old story, and at some point in time, we have to reveal ourselves. We have to stop playing the games because in the games, there is no intimacies. There's just kind of rules, deals that are cut there. And they are destined to break down because it's like having two pieces of armor go to bed together at night trying to be intimate, or masks. It's impossible. They will attract the other, but they can't keep the other. They have to break down, and that's not a bad thing. They're supposed to. Because they're not real, they're not you, they're not based on your love of yourself, they're based on your suspicion of yourself. The mask and the armor is what's in relationship as opposed to the real person. The last thing that really comes out is the real you, and yet the relationship is designed to resurrect the real you. That's what it's for. And we don't normally do that. We reach the crisis and we think there's something wrong with this relationship, I'm going to trade it in. Or I'm going to convince my partner to go see a psychiatrist or a counselor. They have to change.
Because we all know it's really about them, right?
In our couples work, every time a couple comes down and sit in their chairs, we hear, they secretly hope and wish that maybe we are counselors that are going to change their partner. You never know. That might be just work that way. Of course, we don't do it that way.
Finally agree that they're the one who is the problem.
So that's what the major point, that's the basis of our whole talk, is that we change our relationship to the whole crisis itself, and it's inevitable. and it will happen. That doesn't mean it's crazy crisis. Sometimes it just means stuck, dead. That's a crisis because it has critical ramifications. That's how you measure a crisis, is what are the ramifications of this? What does it mean? Where you have two people going to bed at night, and the person they know least in many ways is the person they're sleeping with, because they're defended, they're guarded now.
So what is literally happening is when Duane says we don't really know each other, we're talking about at the place where it becomes difficult to get close. That's where you don't know each other. You start out in relationship at a certain distance, right? When you're falling in love, it feels like you're right over here, like this. Not true. You're way over here like this. And you're saying, you are the most amazing. I am so impressed by everything that you have to say about relationships. I just really, really appreciate the fact that you can talk about them like this and share your feelings. You really are an amazing guy.
Wow. And I understand that your marriage ended.
It did.
Yeah.
It was really, really hard.
And you have a child.
I do.
But
2-year-old.
it ended. How come? Why did it end?
Well, I had this huge experience, and I was struggling, and I needed to talk, and I needed to connect, and we just couldn't connect. He just didn't seem to want to talk to me about this or understand. Or
He didn't want to talk to you. As you know, I speak on relationships. I guess I can't comprehend how.
And you know, when you were speaking in your relationship about that crazy 13-year relationship that you were in, and my
It was
heart
rough. It was really rough.
just went out to you.
Really.
She sounded really hysterical and disturbed.
Yeah. It was.
I can't imagine ever getting that hysterical myself.
So, what are you doing after the lecture? This is how the deal is set. And all couples do it pretty quickly. You do a little history taking on each other, you figure out what it is, the promise that needs to be made, and you make it. And you hide.
And you start getting to know each other, and you walk closer.
But back here, we are in relation. Because it's so exciting is because we're more in relationship with what might be, could be, should be, than what is. We don't even have an is yet. We have the fantasy of what it might be, and it's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, for me, it's always 2 weeks. Some others, it's 2 months. Nothing she would say in the first 2 weeks would ever be wrong.
And so we start to get to know each other, and we're walking closer. And the more we get to know each other, we eventually reach this wall where now, if we go any further, unconsciously, my fear is that he's going to see the person that I am afraid I am. And what we're literally doing is revisiting that moment of disconnection. Now he's becoming important to me just like my father was. Now I start fearing, what if I'm not important to him? What if the same thing starts to happen? Unconsciously, those fears start bubbling up. And we don't know how to get any closer when we hit that. We mistake the feelings that are being stirred around inside for something they're doing outside. And this is where we hit this wall, and now we start to blame this pain on something that they're doing.
Does everybody understand that? I'm sure you can relate to that. How quickly do you start explaining your pain by what your partner has done or is doing? Like it happens, and you think it's logical. They did this, I feel this, it must be, even though I had this feeling, the moment she started finding anything even remotely critical in me, it would trigger that whole thing around, oh my God, I am a disappointment, just like who? My father. My whole identity is wrapped up in not being like him. She hits that piece. And I am now thinking that when that finger points at me, hit it. Ugh. When she points something out to me, there's something wrong that I just did. Rather than being responsible for what actually it's triggering in me, right, the thing I've had my whole life, it's a lot easier just to say, you know what? You got a problem with that finger. I know a finger guy. You should take it in because you've got a problem with that. In fact, you're needy. You're controlling. I know what I'm talking about. I'm a relationship specialist. Do something about that. Implicitly saying, or I'm gone, which hits her wound. Remember what her wound was? Dad's never there.
And this early in our relationship, well, probably we got together about 17 years ago.
January of 96 we met.
We met, yes. And then I would say how many years in were we escalating around our crisis? 3 to 5 years in.
Somewhere
we
in
did
there.
it for 2 years, at least.
The end of the millennium.
And what would end up happening, somehow it never occurred to me that this guy was traveling all over the world doing lectures and workshops, right? Just like who? My dad. I don't know why I was completely blind to this fact in those first 2 weeks, but very shortly I became quite attuned to what was happening. And we used to get into our big thing about him traveling and not spending enough time. And that was the thing. When we were back here, this was the thing that we would start getting into a debate and a fight about, although Presbyterians don't totally fight. It was a very passive-aggressive fight that would happen. So I would say, do you think you're going to be on time for dinner tonight?
I told you earlier that, this company is barely even, I don't know if we're going to make it to the end of the month. I've got to stay out here at the center. I got to work.
And isn't this company based on relationship and connection? And actually being in relationship requires
and
time.
Understanding.
And time.
And understanding.
And getting to know each other. Time.
Right? We're both on each other. We both find a way of not dealing with what's going on in self by having a battleground in the relationship instead of a battleground in self. And this can go on for a lifetime, and most often does.
And mostly what ends up happening is we do this little sort of dance together, right? We'll get into a thing, and what ended up happening in our relationship is he would subtly threaten that, maybe this isn't working, Catherine. Maybe it's not going to work. And that, for me, is a moment of my dad, and what I would do is what I learned in my family, which is to adjust and adapt and just, now is not a good time to bother your father. I would move the goalposts around, back off for a while until things settled down. And that was the little thing, and we all do our own variation of this dance in relationship where we are, we can't stand to be too close, but we can't stand to be too distant either.
Right, and when I would say that maybe this isn't working, Catherine, I didn't say this as a means of ending the relationship. All I knew was it worked. It backed her off because I could not stand to have somebody too close. I didn't really know what that was. My whole life, I've never, up to that point, did not know how to be close, despite being an expert in relationship dynamics. Intellectually, I was and am, but I did not know how to handle somebody getting close because it stirred up, she's going to find something wrong with me. That's my ultimate fear. And so I would use that. It would push her. I didn't consciously use that to push her back. I think I just unconsciously knew that worked, and that's what you do in relationships. You find out what works. But you're not working on anything. You're working on sustaining a level of actual authenticity and intimacy that's very familiar in your family system for generations. And every time we come up to this crisis, every time you come up to this crisis, There's an opportunity there to finally be one that's going to do something different. But we don't. We're going to get to what different is in a minute. We're going to first go to what we normally do. So, the first 2 steps of these 7 steps to a successful relationship are what everybody knows. Every relationship will enter some kind of crisis. And from that, there will be a commitment to dealing with the anxiety that comes up in the middle of that crisis. It's all about anxiety. She starts getting too close to me. The first thing I feel is anxiety because she's getting too close to what I fear she's going to find. So I feel shaky, I feel tense, I feel scared, I feel anxious. And the anxiety tells me to do something. Instead of what it's really about, it's actually saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. You've made something up about yourself that is not correct. We don't get that message from it. We get, what do I have to do to alleviate it? And we make a commitment. And what we commit to is trying to get rid of the anxiety. We do it by 2 ways. We act it out. This anxiety, right? We act it out, or we act it in. Acting out always involves somebody else. It's kind of amplifies the anxiety in some way and goes out there. Acting in is something we do to kill it, to nullify it, to deaden it, to muffle it. So we're going to start with acting out. Any ideas on things that we do when we act out our anxiety, when we hit this crisis in relationship? Affairs, for sure. Make the other person wrong. Blame, anger. Over-functioning, for sure. I'm going to make everything okay. I'm just going to be everywhere all the time. I'm going to control. I'm going to make plans. And I would counter that on my acting in by under-functioning. Yeah, blame, affairs, threats, anger, gossip, controlling. The big one is gossip. That's the big one. That's the easiest one to do. There's always somebody around you can talk to about the other one. You know, one of my favorite pastimes is to go down to Starbucks every Saturday morning and sit at a table pretending to read the Herald Tribune, having a cappuccino while I'm secretly listening to people's conversations. I know that's not a good thing to do. But I love it. Only because I'm listening to what people are talking about. Everybody's talking about somebody that isn't there, explaining their pain. You get your best friend because you agree about everything, and you both agree on your explanations of your pain that have got to do with anything but you. They're all talking about somebody that isn't doing it right, should do it better. How are we going to make them do it better? How are we going to change this, alter that? That's why Starbucks is so successful. Right, really. I mean, it's this whole bunch of people doing that. Let's get together and have coffee and talk about it.
And we have on the bottom there controlling. We had over-functioning. They're the same thing. And I think this is a really tricky one because over-functioning can look like love. When Duane says planning, managing, why don't we this, why don't we that? That kind of over-functioning is really an attempt to avoid anxiety that's inside of yourself and fix the situation outside of yourself instead. And particularly in our society, it masquerades as love. But it's not really what you bring when you're busy over-functioning. It's a way of avoiding yourself as opposed to actually bringing yourself. And this is hard for me because I am, in fact, a control freak in recovery. Right? There's part of my mind that definitely thinks, if only you would let me be in charge of you, it would all be good. Part of me believes that to be true. And yet, that's the opposite of the truth. It would be horribly boring for all of you. We'd be so neat and tidy and orderly. It would be terrible.
So those are all the ways it kind of takes an outward expression. I mean, certainly mine with her was threat. When I'd say, maybe this isn't working out, it was a threat. That's how I bullied her. There's so much of that going on in relationships, of hitting the other in their most delicate part as a way of managing your own anxiety. Now, it's not that we do it consciously, but that's where we go because it works. And isn't that ironic? That you, as the partner, they're looking to heal that part of their lives, and now you become a person that is actually more than willing, when push comes to shove, to poke it. And we do that. It's tragic what happens, what people do to each other in relationships, and it's not always overt. How we hit each other where it hurts. When the design of the relationship is actually eventually become a soft place for each to fall instead of a hard place. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, how crazy it can get. Not always in an overt way, sometimes in a very quiet and subtle way, but still equally as damaging. So the other way is acting in, where we want to nullify the feeling. And there's all kinds of these. Let's just put them up. Well, drinking for sure is one where the initial intention is to kill the pain, and it can actually be on both sides, because when you drink enough, it'll eventually become what's on the other side. It'll act out. But initially, it's, oh, isn't this good? I don't feel that anymore. My gosh, how we run from that feeling that. You have no idea how quickly your life could change when you finally say, I'm going to look at that. So it doesn't take long. I'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. But numbing out, TV, work, all addictions, hold that promise. I will take care of that feeling for you. Distancing. All saying, or for me, in my case, the distancing is the underfunctioning, right? The underfunctioner meets the overfunctioner. I will save myself by underfunctioning the relationship. I won't put myself into it. That's how I'm going to express my anxiety. You're going to, I used to say, you're going to suck the very life right out of me.
I look like a life sucker, don't I?
You do it quietly. Anyways, all of those behaviors, folks, every one of them, promise a solution to the anxiety. And none of them deliver it. All of them only deliver the very thing it's trying to get rid of. In spades. We're intelligent people, but we don't get this. It never, ever works.
And typically the dance that we end up doing in relationship is we are back at a certain level of distance where we're kind of at the level of defense where we're having our masks or our strategies. We're interacting with each other. We look across and we say, I really like who you are. And we start getting closer and we hit the wall, and now we're afraid, and then all of these crazy behaviors erupt, right? You might have a fight, you might go off and have a day of silence, whatever it is, and then you've backed off a little, the distance is there, you're back into your nice masks and your strategies, you're missing the other person, you take the step forward, again, those feelings start getting frightened, and we end up doing this little dance where we just can't seem to get beyond this wall. And often in couples, one person who is the overfunctioner or pursuer will be under the illusion that they want to have connection, right? Why don't we go for counseling? Why don't we just spend some time talking? We just really need to plan it into our calendar. That's what we need to do. It's because often in relationship, part of the way that we dance is one will be a pursuer and one will be a distancer. And what we don't realize, pursuers are living under the illusion that they know how to be intimate. Except, hello, who do they pick? They pick the people who are running the other way.
It always baffles me, if the overfunctioners are so capable of being intimate, and that's, they're just waiting for the other to finally show up and it'll be heaven. Why don't they just choose another overfunctioner? You'd think it would just be euphoric bliss, giving to each other all day long, 24/7, just filling each other up with all the good stuff. No, there's no chemistry there. So you always hear that, I don't know, there's just no chemistry. You know, all your friends say, you should date this person. It's just like you. I don't know, there's no chemistry. It's because there's no bad old story to make a good old story an ending to. And if they did meet another overfunctioner, they'd have to be close. And that is, they're as terrified of intimacy as the one running the other way. That's a hard pill for a lot of us to swallow, but it's true.
Mm-hmm. And even beyond all of these behaviors, which we all can all look up at and hopefully say, yes, that's not going to work. Those are unhealthy behaviors. Even beyond all of that, if your mask strategy worked, and your partner, let's say my nice, intelligent mask worked, and he fell to his knees and he said to me, I am going to spend every moment of every day with you from now on. Even though that's just a little creepy. But let's say it worked. I am going to gaze into your eyes 24 hours a day and just tell you what a wonderful human being you are. Can you try just for...
No. Not again.
Not just for a little moment of my amusement?
Oh,
you wouldn't...
I thought you gave this bit up.
I can't help it. I just like it.
Okay.
It is... There. I like it.
Catherine.
That's good.
I don't know what got over me all these years. Like, what was I up to? This is the only place I want to be. I want to be connected to you all the time. I don't even want to sleep at night. I just want to watch you while you're sleeping. I never want to lose touch. I never want to lose contact. What do you think?
I mean, even, so I'm making fun of it, but even if your strategy worked, the love wouldn't actually get in. Because somewhere in the back of your mind is a little question, oh, if you really knew me, if you really saw all of me, you wouldn't be saying that. And so even our nice strategies actually don't work to allow the love in. Doesn't work. This stuff doesn't work, and neither does our strategy system. You're not going to feel connected when you are acting out of a mask, no matter how nice the mask is.
So it doesn't work. So what we have to be willing to do, and it's not easy to do, but we have to be willing to do it, and we have to commit to something else other than this acting out and acting in behavior. We have to stop, like to say, I know what this delivers. I am not going to be fooled anymore by any of this behavior. It doesn't work. It doesn't make me feel better. It just doesn't. I am committing to stopping it, and I'm going to educate everybody around me about that. This isn't saving me, it's killing me. That's really what I got to. With Catherine, we reached a stop place where I had a choice of what I was now going to be committed to. So one day when something happened, heard some critical comment from her, and I turned to her and I said, Catherine, I don't know if this is working. Anticipating my predictable response, which would be for her to figure out how to make me feel okay. So immature. I don't know if this is working.
And my response, and this was after a period of time and some self-reflection, my response was, you know what? The next time you say that to me, I'm going to believe you. Which to me was like a statement. What exactly am I hanging on to? If I am trying to make a relationship work by overfunctioning, by managing, by backing off, if this is true and the relationship isn't for him, then I'm just letting my fear drive me every time I try to overfunction and fix it and back off. If this is true, then I need to turn around and face myself and my own fear that I'm not important if I am not important to him. And so underlying that, it wasn't like if you say that one more time, you're out of here. It wasn't like that. It was honestly, if you say that to me, I'll believe you and I'll respect it.
which was a huge, huge step for her to take. A step that had not been taken, from what I can gather, in her family system ever. Somebody willing to step out and actually consider herself to that extent rather than being a polite Presbyterian, which would be just to move the goalposts again. And I'll tell you, when one person in the relationship is hearing the lesson, folks, one person hears the knock on the door of the lesson, it's knocking on the door of the other one simultaneously. Both have an opportunity to graduate, to evolve. So when she said that to me, the next time you say that, Duane, I'm going to believe you, I could have gone back into my acting out stuff. Right? I could have, and this is what couples do, this is when they become fights. I could have upped the ante. Instead of looking at what is going on inside of me, I can return it and say, are you giving me an ultimatum? You know, I don't take the ultimatums. Right? We could have started something because I just don't want to deal with me. This is when you fight, because you do not want to deal with you. You'd rather deal with the other. I didn't do that because I'd been there too many bloody times in my life. This was a very, very familiar place. I saw all my past relationships, this crossroads, where I would end it, up the ante, or she would up the ante and have an affair, and I'd get me in my unworthiness, and I'd chase, and away the drama goes. No, I didn't want it anymore. No more! So instead, I committed to something else.
And this really, I think this is becoming more and more of a theme in terms of the work that we do. And that is around taking emotional responsibility. Because all of these various strategies in acting out and acting in are ways of dealing with our emotions that are unhealthy and irresponsible. And when you do that, you also force others to deal with your feelings. Every time you're acting out, you are forcing your dilemma onto somebody else. You're sharing it, spreading it around like a bad virus.
Even if you're an acting in person that thinks you don't create any waves at all.
Oh yeah, how many people have walked into a silent household and felt the vibe of the quiet, the silent treatment?
Or a person that says, I don't want to talk about my feelings. I don't need to. Just don't bother me. As if that's a neutral thought. Anybody in that person's life is now going to have to tiptoe around that fragility, and there will be implicit rules of play in their friendships even. It's not neutral. If I hope to get you anywhere is to appreciate that everything we do has impact. There are no neutral moments. So just because you want to step out doesn't mean you are. You're still as effective stepping out as if you were right in the middle of it. Just like if you're having a problem in your family and you haven't spoken to a family member in a few years, or they live back east and you're not just talking, you think you've removed yourself. You haven't. It's still active in its silence. There's communication in the silence. It's active all of the time. I really want to double bind you about that. Because if you're not willing to make a change for yourself, start thinking about the people that have to be different to accommodate you all the time with whatever you got going, because, as Catherine said, you're not being emotionally responsible. We're not doing this to spank you. Doing this to wake you up. Because the moment we decide to become emotionally responsible, and I really, really, truly believe that's an extremely unique and skilled feature of this whole Clearmind experience. The people that teach in our classes and our workshops and support groups have all committed to being emotionally responsible human beings. And I think that's the way the world is attempting to evolve to. We're going to get there, folks. We're going to get there, but we have to start with ourselves.
And the first practice around that is something we call containment. And that doesn't mean stuff your feelings. That literally means be 100% responsible for your feelings and allow yourself to have them. To actually feel them. Not numb them out, not cut them off, not dump them on your partner. Actually feel them. Because here's the deal with feelings. If you want to feel a life full of joy and excitement and passion and love, you can't do that if you say, I want to feel all of that, but I don't want to feel angry, and I don't want to feel sad, and I don't want to feel afraid. So whenever I feel angry or sad and afraid, I'm just going to chow down on a chocolate cake and kick it back with a, shot of wine. It will not work, because if you want to feel all of the good stuff, you have to be willing to feel, period. The very same, if you think about the experience of fear and the experience of excitement in your body, those two things are very close together. They're only a hair away from each other. Same is true of anger and passion. Same is true of intense sadness and joy. All of these feelings, if we want to have the positive ones on this end of the spectrum, we actually have to allow ourselves to evolve through these things where we're stopping ourselves from feeling. So the first step, containment, is literally to say to yourself, what am I really feeling here? Not what do I want to blame my partner for, but what am I legitimately feeling?
To stop long enough to actually allow that to happen. I didn't realize that in that relationship I was in prior to this, there was a real cataclysmic moment at the end in being alone, where I realized I spent 15 years avoiding 15 minutes of being with myself in that relationship. 15 years to avoid being alone with myself, which was, it's an epic moment when you have the courage to actually be emotionally responsible about what is going on inside of me. Because I'm telling you, until you ask yourself that question, you're never going to sort it out, you're never going to heal it, you're never going to change it. It's just going to ferment into vinegar, not good wine. So, containment is everything, and we don't know much about that in this Western world, because all that acting out and acting in stuff, it's all full of magical ideas in the Western world. Drama. You turn on television, watch any commercial, they're all making some promise about a way to get rid of that anxiety, rather than addressing what it is. So when we can allow ourselves to contain it, that doesn't mean to cut ourselves off from the feeling, folks. Doesn't mean just be polite now in your household. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to be contained. That's being dead. We're not asking you to be dead. In fact, we're asking you to be alive. So instead, something else happens. It moves to confession. It moves to a confession. So when she said that, the next time you say that, Duane, I'm going to believe you, I had should I amp this up? Should I act out some more, get control of this relationship again? Make her feel bad so I can feel okay? No, I'm not doing that. I've done that. I've done it. I'm done. No. Maybe it's time to legitimately step closer where nobody in my family system has ever stepped before. Oh my gosh. Where my dad never stepped. He went to the pub instead of doing this. I'm sorry. I have been up to craziness. I'm turning myself in. I am so frightened of somebody getting close to me that they're just going to see what a schmuck I am, that I'm really nothing. My fear is I'm nothing. I don't feel like I belong anywhere. The only time I can belong somewhere is if I run everything. Nobody can fire me then. So I started Clearmind. I'm just so, and what I get, I hit you. Every time you just want me to be closer to you. Like you've changed a whole lot of things in your life just to be with me. It's a really scary place for you to be. And I sometimes treat it like I abuse it. I accuse you of being needy. It's a shot. That's not okay. This isn't your problem. This is mine. And I am going to make it mine now. I commit from this point on to not make my problem actually your problem. I'm going to be emotionally responsible about what is waiting for me to deal with, and it's time.
And I'm also sorry, because I have been subtly and not so subtly attempting to manage and control you. And that's not okay, and that's not fair. Because the man that I fell in love with is the man who is traveling all over the world. Because he had a mission and believed in something. And I'm really sorry that I've been trying to diminish you and make you smaller because I'm scared. At the bottom of it all, I'm scared that who I am as I am, just with all my flaws and everything else, is just not good enough to be loved. And so I work really hard trying to make everything okay and trying to make everything be perfect. And I hide myself from you. And I commit to being responsible for myself and bringing myself to you instead of making you responsible for my fears.
Can I step closer?
I'm sure. Public display of affection. Ah!
Yeah, I mean, I can't get enough of hearing that, and I can't get enough of saying that either, really, right? This isn't just a script, folks, even though we've said it many times before. I love it. It's such a relief.
And here is the deal. The key is to bring yourself vulnerably to another human being. So when you can contain yourself and feel all of those feelings inside and get in touch with what your real fear is, instead of trying to manipulate the other person to take care of that for you, you be brave enough to bring it to them instead. And it does take courage and bravery. And we don't discover that these fears that we have about ourselves are not true until we're willing to take that step and confess what's really been going on inside of us to another human being. That is ultimately the place where these suspicions that we hold about ourselves get corrected. They happened in relationship. They happened in connection to another human being. They don't get fixed by reading a book. They can only be healed when you are in connection with another human being.
The problem started as a result of a connection, right? All of our problems got made up in our interaction with mom and dad and important others. Like, who am I? Who are they? What is life? Fear of what I am. It all happened in that interaction with another. That's where they're going to get sorted out too. They won't get sorted out in a lecture. You'll understand it. Or a book. They get sorted out when you start being transparent and authentic around people. You know, a partner, and that's what our Awakening Workshop is all about, is learning how to become emotionally responsible by being finally courageous enough to answer the question, who are you? Really. You have no idea what a moment that is in your life to actually move through that and witness stepping in here, which is what you've avoided your whole life, to step in and realize this isn't hell, this is heaven. This isn't hell, this is heaven. This is where you get all the goodies, not back here where you listen to your fear that says you get your goodies by being more in control, gossip more, have an affair, eat, have addictions, pornography, whatever it is. That never produces, it never delivers. It's only here. And that requires somebody to grow up in this connection. That's where the confession happens, and that's then where the correction happens. That's when it happens. And you've all had that experience without taking a workshop. At different times in your life, you just kind of opened up, cracked, and told the truth and connected with somebody, right? And had one of those sobby, teary moments of making up. That's what that is. It's owning, confessing what was really going on for you around that and taking some ownership about what was going on for you around that. It's a wonderful, wonderful moment. And it can be a lifestyle where you don't need to be defended anymore, period. Period.
And this is the place, this edge where we're being finally emotionally naked with each other. Like, that is the place where you are going to feel a lot. And as you're entering, like as you're putting your toe into the pool and just dipping your toe in there, it feels terrifying. But the moment that you actually step in, that terror turns to all of the positive feelings on the end of the spectrum. Because you discover that what you were terrified of doesn't actually happen. And that's how, when Nasreen said in her introduction that what we do is experiential, literally it means we have to walk into the emotional territory we're terrified of in order to discover it isn't what we thought. And once you do that, it has no more power. Because you now know all the way through your being, all the way through your cells, all the way through your emotions, you know something else to be true. Not just in your head, but in your experience as well.
So those willing to come to the awakening are people that said, I've had enough of all that other stuff. I'm done. They're willing to take that risk. Try another program for a weekend, right? Like, try another program. You have to be willing to fail in a way. Because that's what your fear is. Something bad is I'm going to fail. But if you're not willing to fail, you will never win because you're never in the game.
And we had forgot earlier when we were talking about crisis, we were going to answer a question that we got through Facebook. Because I put out on Facebook, does anyone have a burning question for us this lecture? And this is the place. The question was, what if you just feel like, what if you're not in love? How do you know if you're just not in love? And this is the place where you discover what the truth is. It isn't always just bliss when you arrive at this place and are willing and brave enough to be vulnerable with another human being. But it will be honest and it will be the truth, and no matter what happens there, it means you're going to evolve. Whereas if you're terrified of revealing yourself in relationship to another human being and you just keep avoiding it, you're going to stay stuck there the rest of your life.
And you won't feel love there.
Because if, for example, if I just kept moving my goalposts around, I would have been stuck there the rest of my life. And in that moment where I said, if you say that to me again, I'll believe you, if he actually had said to me, you know, we need to talk. I don't think this is working for me. That would have been hard, but that would have been an evolutionary moment too. So it doesn't, in my experience, 90% of the time, vulnerability has a positive outcome. In my personal experience as a counselor, because I coach my people to do this all the time. Everybody comes into my office is either doing it in the office or being coached to do it elsewhere. 90% of the time it works. Not a guarantee.
With that confession, then the connection, right, comes a correction. Without connection, there can be no correction, because if you're just alone, you're just recycling all your old beliefs over and over and again for a lifetime. And finding all the evidence by your view of out there to justify staying isolated. You'll only see what you need to see to stay here. But here, with this connection, can come a correction, because finally I am revealing what I made up about myself back there, and that is that I am, defective, flawed, the shame of the neighborhood. That's what I have been worshiping. It wasn't a suspicion of self, it was a conviction of self. Finally, it's exposed. Something can happen with it. Here's really what's going on for me. And she can present hers.
Which I did.
Which you did. Want to do it again? No. Anyways, so they come, they're turned in. And from that, we can now help each other, remembering the truth about each other. I mean, when I did this and told her that, her heart broke, much like it happened here on the stage. To actually, but finally, that young part of me finally was in relationship with somebody. Instead of the protector on top, the guard, I was here. And I have been correcting that. That's what our relationship is. I'm correcting that all of the time, healing that all of the time, being emotionally responsible about that all of the time. And so is she. So now the relationship has evolved to a state of growth and correction rather than stagnation and rigidity and being right. Relationship will only grow as far as one person needs to be right about something. That's it. You're done. And once those corrections start happening, we release the part of us that we've sentenced to the basement of our psyches for no one ever to see. And those children in a way can come out and start playing. And we can celebrate. You can celebrate. The relationship now becomes a vehicle for expression of itself to the world, for all those around. It becomes kind of a teaching instrument. It becomes a model for something else other than fear, stuckness, rigidity, poor me, victim consciousness. It becomes a proactive vehicle of healing. Even if you aren't psychologists, you just become, people start noticing what you do. And it has an impact. Everything has an impact. And I'm sure you all want to have a good impact, don't you? I mean, why not? Why not turn it up? Why not maximize it? Why not really understand what that means and live it? Because you can. That's what we do. That's all we're doing here.
So in a way, this concept of emotional responsibility, when you're actually willing to say to somebody, here's who I am, flaws and all, it's an act of self-love. It's an act of self-love. And you will never feel loved unless you have the courage to let somebody know who you are and risk being known in that way. I know for sure when I leave this world, I want to know that someone really knows me and loves me. Not somebody appreciates my nice mask, but somebody actually knows who I am and loves me. And that's how it's the healing, the connection is actually the correction. Those two things go hand in hand. Because when you bring your real self back into the world again, you are automatically believing, like that is the vehicle through which you correct your own fears about who you are too. Now you're connected again. Who you are is important and valuable in this world. So hopefully we have inspired you to take that step into being willing to be vulnerable and to have the courage to really show yourself to others and be yourself fully. And hopefully we've also made it clear that the tremendous rewards to that are all the good stuff that we've been talking about.
And you become impactful with the world. That is our ultimate mission. Mm-hmm. It's not just to feel better, folks. This is just yet another, which thing is going to make me feel better? In our continued obsession with acting in and acting out behaviors and anxiety and all that stuff, we're ripping off the world from you. You are a vital part of the solution, and you're supposed to be all of you, in love with you, and celebrating you, and bringing that to a relationship instead of trying to find it from somebody. You celebrate it. You celebrate what you are. And the world will become a better place. So, Olivia's going to come back, or Naz.
Thank you for your time and your attention here.